Well, man, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We know you're super busy, you got a lot going on, but with this, we're excited to share your story and also connect with other aspiring entrepreneurs, small business owners
Sure.
that have decided to go on this wild ride of starting, building businesses and having this ambition to scale them. We love to kind of start these stories in that background heritage space because I think it's helpful to understand how you even got here
Sure.
in the first place. And so we know, you were born late 80s, Queens, but
Yep.
you grew up in Jersey, right?
That's right. I spent
Um,
all of like a day in Queens.
why did your family decide to, or your parents decide to move so quickly?
Yeah. So my parents immigrated from the Philippines here in the mid '80s with my two older brothers already
Okay.
in tow, and so once they knew they were having me, it was like, don't know that we want to raise three boys, in the city.
Yeah.
The area of New Jersey that we moved to was like developing,
Mhm.
so it still wasn't really super built out yet, but
Yeah.
there was just more land for us to roam around in. It was a little bit of like, I don't know, the way they described it to me was a little bit of like a frontier where, they were among the first Asian and certainly among the first
Oh, my
Filipino
goodness.
families. But they just felt like overall they could raise us in a way that they wanted to,
Right,
outside the
away
city.
from kind of the busy situation that was happening there. So, as your family being kind of one of the few and first Asian families in that community, what else was the dynamic of the community?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends growing up, like the town itself was heavily Irish American, Polish American, and Italian American. Um, and so like it's interesting. I feel like a lot of my own friends who started businesses in our space will talk about how like their home cooking or their like
Yeah.
comfort food was something that's like, I don't know, I'm Filipino, so maybe it was like an adobo or sinigang or like like a particular Filipino dish.
Right,
For me, it was actually chicken parm and linguine
right.
because our hometown had like, and I think my parents and I counted it at one point during the pandemic. There's like 22 or to 25 like separate Italian American joints, either selling pizza or pasta
Yeah.
or whatever.
Just
And
in the
so
neighborhood.
just in that neighborhood, it's not like it's certainly not a small town,
Mhm.
but it's not like a gigantic town that can that can usually accommodate all
All
of
of
that.
that.
And so that was actually kind of my upbringing. Like, yes, we definitely ate Filipino food, family parties, cooked it at home, but the way my parents taught me about culture and I guess how to be like American was by eating the foods that were, around us
Of the community.
of the community. And we also, fortunately, like the town next over had a huge Portuguese population. Town the other way, huge Puerto Rican and Dominican population,
Yeah.
and then 15 minutes away, big town called Edison, which is like huge for various Asian American communities.
Wow.
So like growing up, I mean, there's photos of me. At least I don't know if they're public, but actually some of them are. I was like a pretty rotund, pretty obese child. Like I definitely from an
You were
early
like, I'm
age,
eating all this food.
I loved eating early, and so it was just awesome to have that kind of exposure to like that diversity of food and cuisines.
Did you know that was an unusual experience, like compared to maybe what you would end up finding like from colleagues and classmates? Like, because personally, I didn't grow up with that many different cultures
Sure.
around. Like, being able to have that interaction with that many different cultures, growing up in the South, like
Yep.
you had basically a worldview.
No, I don't think I realized it, going through it. It's so funny. Like my high school friends, are also like super diverse. Where it hit for me, honestly, a bit more was when I went to college. So I went to Villanova University in Pennsylvania.
That was like 2005.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and like phenomenal school, and I'd say a lot of my best friends today are still from that from there. Um, but that definitely was the first time that I was woken up to like, okay, not a lot of people had my exact upbringing. At the time, and I think it's gotten a lot better since. But at the time, wasn't very diverse, and it wasn't even a matter of like, oh, all the Asians are together. It's all the people of color
Or
are together, or at least like know who each other are
Yeah.
and whatnot. And so That also taught me a lot, though.
Mm.
I gotta say, and I think especially in the business that I'm in now,
Yeah.
like navigating a world that still has that as the default, power structure.
Right.
There's a lot of conversations that I have with other entrepreneurs about like how do we make it in these kinds of power structures. We obviously are. It's changing and it's
changing,
evolving,
right?
but it's still not.
We
fully
still have
there,
a
so you still got to
long,
navigate
long way to go, and it just, it brings up different emotion, brings up different feelings that, you have to imagine your other colleagues, that aren't folks of color, definitely aren't having those same things. Going back to that Villanova period, how did you respond or react to realizing, oh, this is vastly different from the representation that I experienced in my community growing up?
Yeah, I think that's actually where a little bit of my, I want to call it competitiveness, like started to actually show a bit. I mean, I played some sports growing up. Like every Filipino, I at least shot a basketball.
Were you any good?
I played through freshman year,
Okay.
and then honestly, I think I could have made the JV team. I lost interest though, to be completely honest with you. And maybe I would have gotten cut. That's fair. That's fair. But what I saw was, okay, I'm at an interesting like intersection here where not at all like the dominant like representation here, but like I kind of took it as I now want to kind of beat everyone, or I want to get to the top.
Yep.
And interestingly for me, it wasn't even about academics. In many ways, academics kind of took a back seat. But where I really started thriving was in a bunch of student organizations. Specifically, I became the editor-in-chief of our college newspaper as a sophomore. That's why I love like storytelling. I love what you do. I love like I love this industry of like of telling folks stories. And like I kind of saw it as, okay, if this is a group, if this is like where the power structure is, I'm gonna like penetrate it and get to the top. And I was pretty like, I'll say I was pretty competitive about it. I worked hard to like, foster connections.
Where'd that come from? Where's that drive come from a competitive sense? Is that something that you observe from your parents or your community? Where's that come from?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's so funny. I almost feel like I'm in therapy because I just started therapy 2 months ago, and this is one of the biggest things that we're like diving into is like,
oh my goodness,
why do I have this kind of drive?
I'm in the same thing. I'm asking like the same questions, like why do I have to approach it so intensely? Like, can I dial it back?
I know, right? Honestly, like the biggest thing that I saw was, I mean, the biggest thing that I've come to right now is, I have vivid memories. Of my childhood and how much my parents sacrificed to give my brothers and me the life that we could basically choose what we want to do
versus having to be somewhere, do something for 40 years, same thing.
Exactly. Like I feel fortunate. It's so funny. Like one of my favorite comedians, like it is for a lot of Filipinos, is Joe Coy, and he talks about how like a lot of Filipinos are kind of like pushed into being a nurse or what have you. My parents weren't that, and like I felt like they went the extra mile, to provide a living for my brothers and me, so that we could choose to do what we wanted, and I just never. I mean, part of it maybe is like a projection of myself that like I'm not sure that I would be so generous. I mean, I think about my parents coming, literally to the other side of the world to give a living for me and my brothers that was way better than what was happening in the Philippines at that time.
And that was like wartime when they were there.
Yeah, it was like under martial law.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's been in my head is like I want to make it worth it for them, and they've never put that on.
Put that on them, but it's just how you translated their sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm still sorting through it because I think, especially now with this business, it ultimately, as you might imagine, like, and I'm sure with yours as well, it's like, it's a personal thing that there's an emotional and cultural aspect to it, but it's also like, these are flavors, this is a brand that, in many ways, I'm trying to represent both like the Filipino American community well, but also like Asian American, and like there ends up being more of a tie here than I don't know if I were to start an app or something. Right.
It shows like a bit more like you can segment out the emotion of it.
Yep.
Right. It does have a very personal connection to it.
Yep.
And so when you were in school though, you initially were focused on engineering. You majored in engineering.
Yeah.
Is that right?
My degree was in chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering.
Yep.
What did you want to do with that?
So the original thought was talk about the competitiveness. I was just like, I wanted to cure cancer. I was
Wow.
like, so my original thought was I was pretty good in my math and sciences, had amazing teachers in high school, and the goal was, hey, like I'd love to get into like, manufacturing a world changing drug, and one of my internships for the summer was working, not directly at one of the big pharma companies, but they did a lot of there's a consulting firm that did a lot of work for big pharma. Um, and absolutely hated it. Like there were certain parts of it that I got that was like interesting from an intellectual perspective.
Yeah.
But like I mean, it's the value of internships is you actually
You can learn what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
And I think that goes so unsaid. Folks don't. It's part of it's like get work experience, but no, part of it is also like having the ability to know ahead of time what you like and what you don't like.
Yep.
So that as you get older, you don't have to start doing it then, like you kind of already know.
Absolutely.
Right.
Unfortunately, I feel like I took that tactic for the next like 10 years of my life.
Because you would try a couple of different things, right?
Yeah, I mean, so like coming out of college, I worked for I worked in the nuclear power industry. So I was working at a nuclear power plant for 3 years in the.
What were you doing there?
My group was, I kind of kid you not, we were the group that was in charge of making sure that there were systems in place so that bad things didn't happen. So there are a couple different groups. So like one of the big groups was, okay, we're actually generating the power, and how do we get this power onto the grid?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was our group, which was how do we make sure nothing goes wrong in that process?
That feels like a lot of pressure.
Fortunately, and I'll say this, like I didn't think it was going to be a whole conversation on nuclear, but like or on energy, but like it's actually I think a testament to the safety of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
It actually why I left it was I wasn't interested enough, or I didn't feel challenged enough in it. It wasn't like the good thing was the power plant is actually very well run, and a lot of things are going very well. That some days I wouldn't say boring, but it actually fortunately wasn't that eventful.
I got you. So you tried that out. That didn't work. Investment banking, that wasn't it.
Yep.
Bombfell, which is a retail startup.
It was, yeah. Unfortunately, it got sunsetted October of I think 2020 or 2021. But yeah, an apparel startup basically is at a time when in the late 2010s there was a lot of putting stuff in a box and sending it out.
Yep.
We had a good run. Learned a ton.
What was the thing that stuck out the most to you in that experience?
A couple things. So one of which, well, I think probably the biggest thing was this is also at a time where companies were being started and scaled that there are now podcasts, Netflix series, Hulu series, and Apple TV series about.
I can tell you one of which I've participated in every single version of their story, which is WeWork.
Yes, yeah, right. And so like, as those stories were happening, I felt very. I still feel a high level of gratitude because our culture was not that. I thought we had, our three founders were, I think, the most intentional, nurturing, caring founders that I could have ever imagined working for. In many ways, they changed how I thought about life because I felt like they gave me an environment where I could do valuable work, build, but be nurtured throughout it, not have these kind of toxic work environments that a lot of folks,
unfortunately are in.
Are in or that you read about. So that was like, for sure. I mean, that still permeates how I think about building the brand and the company that we're trying to build. And the second one, which is a bit more of like a more pure business learning, was the value of going after big markets. There's, for as great as we were, and as I would put them on par with literally any other founding team that's, IPO'd or sold their business for billions of dollars. Like, I would literally put them there. They certainly have the credentials, but also just like the way that they thought about the business, I'd put them on that level. But ultimately, it came down to like the actual addressable market for selling men clothing through a subscription box service. And we did, I think everything that we possibly could, but you get more, like, it's easier if you have a product that sticks with a bigger market. You have more margin for error.
Right. Versus it being so niche, and like
Right.
if that funnel cuts off, then
And that's basically it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you have to at like mid stage, $10+ million, like literally pivot the business into something else, which is like it's tough to do at a startup
very
because
hard.
you're already under-resourced.
You're already stretched.
Right.
right. So these different experiences are happening. You're working. When do you get this entrepreneurial bug, right? Because at this point, you're still very much more so thinking corporate, career path
Sure.
type of thing, startup path. When do you start to take a look across, the bridge per se?
Yeah, I mean, a big one for me was, I actually considered Bombfell that first foray.
Okay.
I was one of the first 7 to 10 people there.
Yeah,
full time.
you basically are entrepreneurs together.
Yeah, and actually the reason, it happened so fortuitously. I was actually trying to start my own version of what they were doing. I had no idea that they had existed. So while I was in banking, fortunately my group, like what we did on the trading floor, you're in early, but you're also out at a certain time every day. It's not like these like mergers and acquisitions folks who are just like chained to the desk until 5 a.m. every night.
Yeah.
We actually were let out. And in that time, I actually was spending my evenings literally going to stores, buying clothes for friends, and showing up at their doorstep and being like, hey, they basically filled out a little bit of a questionnaire, told me their preferences. I would show up to their door with like a suitcase or a duffel bag.
Right.
They would take what they wanted, and then like I'd show them the receipt, and I'm like, if you want this, like Venmo me this, and then maybe added a little bit of like a finder's fee.
Give me a little something.
And then go from there.
Yeah.
So that definitely started me down this path of like, oh wow, like this is unlocking and like flexing like completely different muscles than I'd been used to, and like kind of got addicted to that idea of building.
Yeah.
But like I was maybe like 4 months in, and then I found Bombfell, and I was like, and I tried the service out, and I was like, oh wow, you guys have figured out a lot more things there, and I think I'd be better served, because I was coming to a point where I was like, oof, I'm gonna have to make some pretty big money decisions if I want to go do this.
Yeah.
Getting in the world of physical goods, like the inventory requirements are pretty real,
significant,
quickly.
Yeah.
And so fortunately they had a role open, applied for it. Throughout the course of the conversation, it was like, wow, okay, you guys are actually like several steps ahead, and I could stand to learn like your process, how you build, how you even think about building. Like I think even that perspective is something that is key, and
very valuable.
And a lot of folks coming either like out of college or dropouts. Like I'm so impressed by folks who don't have startup experience and who can still build massive empires, because it's like I couldn't. Like I needed that level of experience, I think, to kind of give me the right
But it also shows like a maturity, right? Like you're clear on like, this is what I know and this is what I don't know, and like to be able to sit in that moment and say, I could actually, maybe I need to go in here, learn a ton, and then maybe we can continue this journey if I decide to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you start to get that bug there, right?
Yes.
And you would kind of start to act on that maybe around 2018.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what inspired the act?
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of things are happening. One that was, I guess, like helpful to the creative process was that, Bombfell things were starting to go a bit sideways, and definitely to a degree down. And so that gave me a bit more bandwidth
more time
to think about other things. I will say at the time also, I was, that was like a 4-year period. I was feeling a little burnt out. I actually debated at one point taking a bit of a sabbatical. Like I literally had mapped out doing like a long-term Airbnb in Thailand and just like clearing myself and figuring out the next step. And it was fortunately at that, it was fortunate at that time, and I wouldn't say it was like an all in like one aha moment, but over the course of several months, you know, just started, I guess, taking notice of what was happening in broader culture, which for me, at least like through the lens of the world that I was seeing, was a film in Crazy Rich Asians that became the number one film at the box office.
Yeah.
Not just number one Asian American film, number one film.
Box office. Period.
And is still now the 6th highest grossing rom-com of all time.
That's crazy.
You know, we're in New York right now, and this is now year 10 for me. Notice that like certain key cultural areas of the city, like the Village, West Village, East Village, St. Mark's area, Lower East Side, a lot of these restaurant and bar concepts were converting from being just super like French or Italian inspired to like really like digging deep into like regional Chinese cuisine, Southeast Asian culture. Like Filipino food was starting to get there, but really like awesome Thai, Vietnamese restaurants were opening up, and these chef restaurateurs, like they were blowing up on Instagram.
Yeah.
They were getting crazy profiles in New York Magazine, the New Yorker, and like when you went to these restaurants, this is also like, I guess this was the second generation after like David Chang's Empire Build in 2011, but like when you went into these restaurants, it wasn't just like Asians or Asian Americans in there. It was like a bigger mix of folks. And so like that started planting the idea in my head of like, hey, is there something I could lend to this conversation? I've had I don't know. I don't even know if it was interesting, but it was, maybe there's, again, where like that level of confidence comes in, where it's like, I have something to contribute to.
I have something that I see an opportunity here.
Yeah. And also at the time at our office, at the Bombell offices, we had all of this sparkling water of different flavors. It was like the summer of LaCroix.
Oh my goodness.
And bubbly and all these other brands, but they were all the same exact flavors.
Oh yeah, everybody was just one to one, same profile, just different label, just different logo.
Yep. And I just felt like there's got to be something here that we can at least like play around with.
Yeah.
And so the goal was, I mean, actually a lot of the inspiration was going into, let's say, like a Momofuku restaurant, or one of these other restaurants. And especially in a place like this that's super competitive, there's a lot of care given for sure to the food menu, but even a lot of these places also attention given to the drink menu. So what wines you're putting on, your cocktails, all that jazz. But then you got to the soft drink section, and it was Coke, Sprite, and in some of these restaurants, specifically San Pellegrino. And I was like, why is there, or Perrier, and I'm like, why is there nothing here that like hits that? And like, I don't know that I had, I mean, sure, I thought there was an aspiration that, you could build a brand that was global, and I think the aspirations have grown with the traction.
Yep, of course.
But I always did have this idea that like if I could just like wedge ourselves in with this community, it is like super supportive, super collaborative. If we could just like cultivate and support this community and give this community like a beverage option that was interesting. Okay, we can start there and
we can go from there, right? You got to have your footing, your foundation,
your tribe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Did you know how to make soda?
Zero. I had zero knowledge. And like even some of the earliest steps in the process are like laughable at this point. So what I did was, I was like, at that point I knew absolutely nothing. So my first thought was, okay, let me just to even produce samples. I'm going to treat this the way that like someone might brew beer at home. Okay. So I figured, okay, well, brewing beer is actually much more complex than making, sparkling water with a little bit of juice inside. So that's been done before. So this has to be this has to be
somewhere. Yeah.
It's funny, even for me being an engineer, I learned through that process that I shouldn't be touching things. I tried to basically home bottle my own versions of the beverage, and it went pretty terribly. It was like whatever. Yeah. It's certainly something that I could give to a friend, but not sell at a store.
Yeah, you weren't like, I'm not,
Yeah, so the next evolution of that was to actually like, so the trick that I tell founders all the time is go into a local specialty natural store.
Like an independent mom and pop type of spot.
Exactly.
Okay.
Chances are most of the brands that are there are like at your stage or like just one ahead. So I just started cold DMing folks and cold emailing and being like, hey, I have this idea for a brand that I'm trying to launch. I'm trying to figure out these 2 or 3 things.
Yeah.
Could you point me in the right direction?
How responsible folks?
Remarkably. And actually, one thing, the food and beverage industry, I grew to learn, insanely collaborative. Everyone wants to help each other out. The second part, though, I think is just like a tip that I've given to every founder, which is like, come to the table with something, right? Like, show that you've done some research, and then for me, like, that's why a big part was like, I need help with these 1, 2, or 3 things.
Right.
Can you point me in the right direction?
Yeah.
It shows that I've done my homework, and that all you need to do is like point me there. Right. You don't have to spend crazy amount of time.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking you to build it for me. I'm literally like, I have this, these are the gaps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just kind of like build and level up from there.
Right, right. So you're getting into this, you're figuring out, some of these gaps that you don't know. And then at what point do you start kind of feeling confident in what you're building, and like what are the flavors that are like people are responding to, like what's happening?
Yeah. I think, in general, and I don't know for any entrepreneur that you ever feel like confident enough to take the leap. Eventually you just kind of have to do it. Yeah. The way that I started trying to build up some wins, and they teach you this in like, I don't know, food and beverage 101, is once you make the product, like get out there in the market. If you're going to sell it, if you're going to put it on a grocery store shelf, do demos, like literally pour the product out, talk to customers, get their feedback. And fortunately, from the first few demos that we did in our first few stores, like it turned. So we would pour it, they'd sip it, and they're like, I want to buy it. I want to have it with my meal.
Yeah.
And so like getting those initial reps, like honestly, for me, really, I don't know if it's a confidence thing, but it's like seeing someone pay for a product that I created, like it's like the greatest feeling in the world.
It never gets old.
It never gets old. And it's just like, okay, if you're willing to pay for this, let's keep going.
Yeah, right.
And so I think but like to your point, like there's been so many different checkpoints, but like I think like the very first one would have been at those stores, and we like so cool that it was selling when I was there, but better it was selling when I wasn't there.
Because then it started to have a recurring, like, I actually like this, I want to get it again.
Right.
Or then word of mouth started to spread because somebody told someone.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what you ultimately want.
Exactly. Or especially in that stage, which is so early, one of the biggest things that I think I've learned is the packaging just matters.
I was going to ask you about that, right? It's like, especially in beverage, you like everything from, soda to beer to wine, like the labels are incredibly like important, and it matters. And I particularly, in this particular space, non-alcoholic beverage, they're really fun. What story, you're a fan of storytelling, what did you want to communicate when you thought about the brand you wanted to create and what that IP would look like in a packaging form?
Yeah, this is also at a time when I felt like, and I love the brand, I love the coffee, I do love everything about it, but the world of brands had gone, especially in like the beverage or cafe world, had just all become Blue Bottle or all derivative of it, which again is awesome, and I absolutely love it. But like what that created for me, I thought, was an opportunity to zag the other way. And so that's why now what you see is like a lot of brands at the time, it was just like white backdrops, certain like the kind of like lettering you put on those boards, I don't know, like white tile. And I was just like, and I don't know, succulents. And I was just like, we're not doing that. It's like, it's cool. It'll work. It works for a lot of brands. But like, if we're going to stand out, let's stand out another way.
Absolutely.
So I'll say brands that I got, that I talked about Momofuku before. It was a big one for me. I loved the loudness and vivacity that it had as a brand. And it was a brand that, again, also to me, like it bridged cultures. People wanted to go there. Yes, both Asian Americans, but also not.
Yeah.
So like that was one of them, and then I'll say like part of the inspiration also was like a Filipino jeepney, which if anyone's ever seen before, it's like a big truck, but that's just plastered with all these different decals and colors and all that stuff. And so I wanted it to have a level of like, Southeast Asian flair.
You wanted some cultural significance in there. Like if you knew, you knew.
Right. But also, if you knew, you knew. I wanted to give that, And also, if you didn't know, totally fine.
Totally fine too.
Right. So that's why we have like the big fruit illustrations
Mm-hmm.
on the front. We also learned through our customer demos that like people wanted to know that the drink had real fruit, no added sugar. So like we actually the first iteration of our bottles did not have that, but our cans now all say
All
it because
say.
that was directly from customer conversations.
Wow. So you were implementing that feedback constantly.
Yeah, and that's why it's like I think it's important in the early days to like be out there because like we were able to like speak the language that our customers were already speaking to us,
Mm-hmm.
and so like being able to mirror that is great because now, I mean, we're going through some like packaging tweaks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, like it takes a lot of time,
Takes a lot of time.
energy.
Yeah, my wife has a plant-based ice cream company, and the pints and the packaging, she tells me all the time because I'm like, you should do this, and she's like, you have no idea. You know, when it comes to the flavors, what were some of the flavors that you felt you wanted to bring to the market?
Yeah, I mean the core three were really it, and on it, so we have a lychee, an Alfonso mango, and a calamansi, which is a Filipino lime. That's kind of like a hybrid of a lime and a tangerine, if you will, in one fruit. To me, like the best version of a citrus fruit you could like literally ever find because it's got like the tartness, but also rounds out with sweetness. So it's like awesome.
That's great.
So I'll say like the launch was a couple things. I wanted to have enough flavors that kind of hit different palates. So the mango super sweet is like our sweetest SKU, although it's only 4 grams of sugar. Our lychee's got some like floral notes to it, and then the calamansi's got the tart. And I also a big thing for me was trying to, and I'll never be able to like represent all of Asia in a product line, but try to hit both the I guess like East Asian demographic, Southeast Asian, and the South Asian like groups. Because the goal of this was to build a brand that bridged all of these cultures, ideally.
Yep.
And so that was, I mean, I R&D'd some other ones, but they just like I did like a tamarind one earlier, and it tasted fine, but didn't look very visually appealing.
That part is important.
Right. And so ultimately, though, like I actually kind of landed on these 3 in the beginning, and was like, this is what we're going with. And fortunately, it kind of worked out.
At this point, how much time are you spending on your business while also balancing your day job?
Yeah, so fortunately, the R&D process, it has a lot of starts and stops. You can do stuff at night, or maybe take a couple calls during lunch, and then you're waiting again for several weeks for something. So the earliest stages of R&D, that was about like a year. And literally for the first like 9 months, 6 to 9 months of that process, I actually didn't find it that super disruptive.
Yeah.
Fortunately, towards the end, like and I also we were going through some downsizing at the company, and it was a perfect time for me to exit.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot of things just kind of came together.
Fell into place and was like, this is the right time. From a financial standpoint, how are you then going to think about supporting yourself, and you still have responsibilities and stuff like that? And then what type of help are you receiving in your business? Like, did you have any employees yet or anything like that?
Yeah, so the beginning of it was entirely self-financed. My savings from being a nuclear engineer, working in tech, working in banking, I mean, all told, over the course of like 12 to 18 months, like over $100,000.
So you really believed in this.
I grew to learn that this business was going to need at minimum that, and I actually have grown to learn since that is a drop in the bucket to building a good brand. Yeah. And it wasn't all at once, so that maybe made it a little bit easier, or maybe a little more sticker shock when I looked at the final tab, and I was like, oh my god, I've actually spent this much. But the way I think about it was, it wasn't all at once, and so it was trying to figure out, with 10K, what can I prove out?
Yes.
And if I can prove that out, cool, we'll put a bit more money in and go. And that's why it was over the course of like a year to 18 months, was because like at each step of the process, I was kind of evaluating, okay, does it make sense to keep, like, not doesn't it make sense to keep going. It's like, where does it make the most sense to put
invest
more money into?
To get that return.
Yeah. And so, that was that.
Yeah.
Did not have any employees. I ended up learning I'd say most parts of the early part of the business myself: manufacturing, sales, marketing, ops, finance. And I think it was important. Like for where we're at right now, I think the conversations I'm able to have, we do now have a team of 17 employees, and I have three directors who know what they're doing in their roles way better than I do, but I can have conversations with them and kind of guide them or challenge them on certain things.
Right, because you have a perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And now though it's getting to a point where they're the one challenging me. Where it's like, hey man, that's how it may have been done, 2.5 years ago, but that's not
we're
how
not
we do it
there.
anymore.
We got different volume.
We're at a different level now. Like get on board with this.
Yeah, totally. I hear you, and it's part of like trusting your team too.
Yes.
Right. So you're out. You're in full time. You're building it. You're getting different accounts. You're going and doing demos, mom and pops, and you're seeing this momentum. 2020 happens.
Yep.
Pandemic. What does that do to your budding business?
It actually accelerates it. So we fortunately, we were in some, it obviously shut off our whole wholesale business.
Yeah.
And we were, it was very door to door, mom and pop, which, we felt terribly for those stores that had to kind of shut down during that time.
Yeah.
But what it did for us was open up our direct to consumer business in a pretty aggressive way.
Wow.
I call it luck that February 20th, 2020, I had just finally stopped packing my own orders in my apartment and moved it to a warehouse.
Wow.
And that worked out great because literally March, April, we saw, I think, 6 or 7x growth, 600 to 700% growth. And I literally couldn't have packed all those orders myself. And so it was good that we had a whole system set up there, because once the world shut down, people were looking for things to buy. You didn't, I think sometimes people forget, at this period of time, people didn't even know, at least in this area of the country, especially in New York, because we were hit so hard, you didn't know whether you could go to the grocery store safely. And so buying groceries through Amazon or Instacart or whatnot was actually a bit of like a public safety concern. And, and at the time also, Amazon, Instacart, they had massive delays.
Oh yeah.
So in some ways, a lot of the emerging brands that had smaller operations set up, you were actually at a massive advantage. And also, you saw, for folks who are digital marketing minded, a lot of travel and luxury, like Facebook and Instagram advertising, those budgets went to zero.
Yeah.
And so an amazing opportunity for brands like us to kind of hop in and acquire new customers at a way cheaper rate than you could have otherwise. So obviously a lot of bad stuff happened, but we were able to kind of make some lemonade,
make some good out of that.
Make some good out of it.
So that's happening, and then I had to snoop quite a bit, obviously. But one of the things I thought was interesting was you turned down the opportunity to go on Shark Tank.
Mm-hmm.
Most entrepreneurs, small business owners are like, gotta go, gotta pitch, gotta, some actually want to do business and some want the publicity, whatever.
Sure.
Why did you turn that down?
Had to. So, definitely had that weighing on my mind too, of like, well, regardless of whether you get a deal, there's stories today about how people still see the spikes whenever Shark their episode gets syndicated on CNBC or what have you. We got the nod in the summer of 2020, right as we were closing our first round of financing, and as we were scaling. And so, because I was still the only employee at the company, I literally would have had to shut down for about 3 weeks.
Oh wow!
Because the way that I think Shark Tank generally goes, and especially during COVID, they flew you out to LA. Well, first off, you have to dedicate a decent amount of budget to building a set that was custom for Shark Tank.
So you have to build that.
That's on you. Yeah, you're making that bet as an entrepreneur, as an owner, that this is going to be worth it. You want to present yourself well in front of the sharks and in front of America, right?
Right.
So first off, it's okay. Instead of growing the business, I now have to go and contract out, a bit probably pretty expensive build.
It's a whole separate thing
to do this. Have to do a Shark Tank pitch is incredibly different from that of a general investor pitch. And at the time, what they had you do was they flew you out, and then you literally couldn't leave your room. They brought you your food. You were isolated for, I think it was like 2 weeks. They'd literally bring you out just to film. You'd have to be in your own separate area. You couldn't interact with the sharks. Like, they had their own thing because the crew had their own thing also because everyone was like,
everybody was panicking.
Everyone was panicking. And so when I evaluated it, I was just like, I could do that. That actually felt riskier than like, okay, I actually have sales. Fall of that year, so September of 2020, we were launching in 50 Whole Food stores.
Wow.
In the New York tri-state area. I was like, I just can't.
I actually have something that's working here. I don't.
Right.
This right now is not the time.
Right. And I was like, maybe in the future when I have a team, we can go back and do it. And I maybe now actually I'd be open to it.
Yeah.
Very different terms, different valuations.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a little different now.
Yeah. But yeah, at the time I just literally couldn't. We were growing too fast.
Yeah, yeah. So in that decision, you made that decision to not do that. You got Whole Foods in the pipeline. Did you do any pitching in between then to raise investment to fulfill those orders, or how did you go about that?
Yeah, so at the time that the Shark Tank offer came, we were growing like 600% in a month, and also got the Whole Foods authorization. So even during COVID, which is the pandemic, it was a terrible time, but like with those metrics, like folks were still like, okay, we can get behind this. Yeah. And so that allowed me, so we raised about $1.3 million at that time, and so that allowed me to start funding bigger production runs. Made my first 2 hires, so finally got some traction to move stuff off
and
of
some
just,
support,
off of just my plate. And so that's why, again, that's why the Shark Tank thing just didn't align there. Yeah. But yeah, like that summer was a big one for us in being able to actually take in some outside capital.
How would you advise other entrepreneurs who are trying to maybe make decisions like that, right, between like an opportunity like Shark Tank and not doing that because of what you feel is going to be better for your business, but they may have like other people in their ear? How would you advise them to navigate a situation like that?
I think for me the first thing, it's funny, it actually starts to me like a couple steps before that, which is your product good? Are people buying it? If so, that opens up opportunities where a thing like a Shark Tank could actually be viable. But like, and I think about this with any level of PR. We have a couple of celebrities who are who are invested into the brand. That's like, that stuff can only amplify a product that's working.
Already good.
It won't make a bad product good.
Right.
And so that's like literally the first thing that I would say to a founder is like, do you have stats that are showing that people like this? Yep. And if so, okay, now let's have that. Now let's have that chat. It's really case by case, and I would actually say I was in a rare scenario where I had to turn it down. I think for most founders, like if I didn't have that situation, I probably would have gone. Gotcha. So we just happened to fall into a situation where we couldn't. Yeah. And I guess other things I would say there are like, there is a financial and time consideration. Also, I think there's it's either 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 chance of your segment actually airing.
Oh,
and so
it's not even guaranteed you record it.
It's not guaranteed. And I think even if you get funded, it's still not guaranteed you air. Wow. And so like there is that level of, I would say, risk in it.
For sure.
And look, the payoff is there. I think ultimately most folks who do the calculus are like, no, the opportunity makes sense to pursue it. But it is important to know that like there are certain things out there that it doesn't look as easy as it looks on TV.
It gets a little bit Hollywood. You're right.
Yep.
So we talked a little bit about kind of the product side. When you think about your brand and what your brand represents, how do you hope to celebrate Asian culture?
Yeah, I mean, our stated mission, our vision is to bridge cultures by connecting people to real flavors. And it's both a celebration to me within the broader Asian American community and our various subgroups, and also the celebration of like the East and West bridging together in a more, I don't know, globalized world, and one where, yeah, like we're talking about various, films like Crazy Rich Asians, or TV shows like
Right.
Squid Game.
I mean, you even had a partnership or a collaboration with Marvel, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Yep. For Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and it's like, you know, that's a lot of folks, and when you're creating products, and how I think about the brand is like, we want to be there for those moments. That's like, I don't know, like the essence of life, I guess, is like having these kinds of moments of celebration, and like we want to be, we want our brand to be part of those moments. And also like those moments, but also like those moments are also indicative of a larger movement that's been happening over the last, couple decades or so. And so, yeah, I like that. That's how we see ourselves, is how do we fit into folks' lives, and in these moments that they have.
I love that. July, right? You celebrated 3 years.
Yes.
It seems like that time has kind of flown by.
It's unbelievable.
What's been the most significant thing that sticks out in your mind about this journey thus far as you reflect?
Yeah. One is just the idea that, like, when you start it, and I still feel this way. If you told me in the beginning that we'd have a year 3, it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. That means I'm actually getting to wake up every day and do something that I have a lot of like passion and conviction over, and that, at a very human level, gives me purpose every day. Like I'm very grateful for what the brand has become and what our community has allowed me to do, because like I feel like I'm getting to be getting to be the person I might want to be. Like that sense of purpose for anyone just unlocks, I think, the best in folks. And I think conversely, that's why folks who have jobs where they're not empowered, it can really take a toll on their, I don't know, mental health, or just like how they feel about life. So I feel very fortunate there. A really interesting moment came also during that time. Actually, not in July, but more like about a month ago, in August, and we had literally a day long, what we call like the war room. Myself, our directors, and our 2 sales advisors who have experience, building up the sales teams at Vitamin Water, Pirates Booty, some big brands, and the work that our team had done in advance of that, I got to the end of the meeting and it was like, wow, we still have to execute on this plan, but we actually have a plan for the rest of 2022, all of 2023, and like I'm starting to think a little bit about 2024 and maybe even 25
right,
to a degree.
Ahead.
Right, and I'm like, we still have we can't get ahead of ourselves here, but it definitely hit me of like, wow, being able to think that far is like a privilege I don't take lightly, and also a milestone in my journey as an entrepreneur that I also don't take for granted.
It gives you the opportunity to be strategic.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
You get to not be reactive. You get to be on the offense.
Yep. We still have to react to a lot.
Yes.
It's a smaller team,
not solely.
But it does allow for a little bit more of that. And that, again, like I think about the journey that we've been on, like what our community has done to like lift our brand up, and I'm like, that's pretty cool.
That is absolutely really cool. So recently it was announced that you raised $10 million, Series A. On top of that, you're in Whole Foods, Sprouts, Safeway.
Yep.
I know you just had your first big team offsite, which is really cool, both coasts. You reflect on the journey thus far, and you think about someone coming up, right? That, another young Filipino cat that wants to create a product. What advice would you give them along this journey?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is, hey, it's a good thing now, like our raise, and we have other friends in the space as well. I think about brands like Fly by Jing, Omsom, Win Coffee Supply. There's like a couple folks who, Boxu, there's a bunch of folks who have a similar thesis. And first thing is, it should be hopefully a little easier, because there's actually some comparable data.
Right, you can show hey, we're not the only ones.
Right, like we didn't have, like our first fundraise was, I mean, I mean, there's a whole conversation there too about like who writes the checks,
Mm.
but like really having to convince people that, oh, like the Asian thing is a thing,
It's
and
a
not
thing.
and not just among Asian people.
Yeah.
Um, so fortunately, some of that is like that some of that a lot of that education has been taking place now over the last few years, which is awesome.
Yeah.
What would I tell another Filipino entrepreneur? The biggest thing that I've gotten from myself is like your personal experience, your lived experience. If you're trying to create a business, and I'm thinking about this from like a pure business perspective, but it's like if you can properly tap into that, like there is value in that in whatever you're doing. What we're like. I think a lot of the world that I've gotten to recently live in is brand building, storytelling, but then also again with these partnerships with with Marvel, with Pixar. We have another one coming up in October that I can't say yet, but like the power of effective storytelling and the uniqueness of our stories is like is valuable
Yes.
right now. People want to see that. People want to hear that. People want to read about it. People want to buy that.
Yes.
And so like I think it's a matter of, and I think it happens a lot with songwriters or stand-up comedians. Like their things are just like literally write every single day.
Yeah.
99 out of the 100 things could be terrible, but like the one thing could like smash.
Thing, yeah.
And you need to get through that 99 to get to the one. And in a similar way, that's what I would say. I mean, to most founders, but I think specifically, and I'll just kind of broaden that out to like founders of color. Like our stories, our voices, like people want it now. We're seeing it now with our program at Target. There's specifically programs for diverse suppliers.
Yes. And commitments, like there's business commitments.
Correct. So, folks need to fill that gap, and it's you could look around, but like ultimately, like if you have the slightest inkling it could be you, but that's already like a pretty big first step of like confidence or just like your belief in your own abilities.
Yeah, because you need to have that before anyone else will.
Right.
Like if you don't believe, you can't expect someone to write a check or someone to buy a product.
Absolutely.
Yeah.